You're taking notes?
I'm just a few things that we want to say in the beginning.
Just so you don't forget.
Yeah.
What are all those scribbles for?
It's not scribbles, it's chicken scratch. Get it straight.
I feel like when you take notes, it's like all in capitals. Like aggressive.
Because cops taught me how to write. It's all the speeding tickets I got. They're all in capital letters. You never notice that?
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, it's aggressive and like very random, and then you have to go back and fix certain letters, and I feel like it's kind of the way you are in life. Like, you're aggressive, having to go back and fix things.
I like disorganized aggression. Funny.
Are you ready yet?
I think so.
I'm so bummed. I'm so bummed.
It's beginning to look a lot like I'm going to have a shit fit.
Oh, I'm so mad. So, if you don't know, North Dakota went through a blizzard this last week. And of course, depending on what you're seeing, this is the middle of April. And we got so much snow. It was like almost gone. We had just a few little piles left. Of course, we got lots at the farm still, but we just finally cleared our street. All the ice was gone out of the street. We just got like 1.5 feet, just heavy, wet snow, too.
This is April 15th.
Yeah. This
Memorial.
is right for Memorial.
Which is a perfect opportunity to do videos since we are drowned in snow again. At least we tried to look on the positive side.
We didn't get the 30
Other than
inches.
being positive that it sucks.
We didn't get the 30 inches or whatever that the western side of the state, they were closed. Like, the whole state was closed down for 3 days. Like, no roads. It was illegal for you to travel. And so, thankfully, we only had no travel advice, which means they advise you not to travel. But anyway, we're supposed to get 6 more inches this weekend, and then it's like, we're going to be snowed in till May, and it's just like, oh, yay for me.
So, good opportunity to do a video. So other than snow, it's Memorial, as Tiffany mentioned. So she got up in the morning and made the bread very quickly. Again, Jesus didn't make it a fancy ordeal to be complicated, which is kind of opposite of the way it was done as far as Passover. Passover was a big deal. I mean, you packed up your family and you went clear across whatever the country and had a big elaborate meal that was the elaborate meal, the roasted lamb that they would sometimes raise all year for that occasion, or
but you were supposed to eat it. You were supposed to eat it in a hurry, and
but it was a big occasion.
Yeah.
But going along with that, Jesus' attitude, because there is a provision if you're not able to do it tonight. There is a provision in the Bible we've talked about before where people that had previously missed the Passover were able to do it later on, 30 days later. And while it's nice to follow biblical examples or biblical patterns, you might say, don't worry about being legalistic about it either. Again, Jesus was all about not being so legalistic about things. He didn't stand and eat in a hurry the Passover. Matter of fact, the scriptures say that he was reclining with them. So, again, don't be so legalistic with it. It's nice to follow a pattern if you can, but we're all about not being legalistic with things.
It's funny because we were in a hurry to get our packages out because it's Friday. And when I was making the bread, I was sort of in a rush to get it done. So I came across my mind, like, in haste, like the scripture says, in haste. I know it says eat in haste, but like I was in a rush to get it done, make it, roll it out, throw it in the oven, 450, blah, blah, blah.
So again, we encourage you, even if you missed it, which would be tonight for us. If you're in Australia, or a lot of viewers are, it would have been last night. But if you did miss it, there is a precedent, if you want to call it that, And not that you can't break precedent, but precedent does mean something in a legal term, but it doesn't mean that every legal situation falls under that precedent. So again, Jesus was not about legalism. Even with the occasion itself, don't be legalistic. Anyway.
Next.
Yeah. So what we really wanted to talk about today, though, as far as the video is concerned, is I was called to jury duty. And that brought up a situation because you were called to jury duty previous to this a few years ago before we were disfellowshipped.
I was called like the year or the year before we were disfellowshipped, like 2017, 2018, something like that. And of course, with everything that we were going through with the congregation, it was really the last thing I wanted to deal with. But, when you're called to a government situation, you have to address it
And
very
I don't think
quickly.
we were going through it quite yet.
I
think we were starting to.
Yeah, we were.
I'd be curious to see if you can look up the date on that. Is it in your computer?
No. I have an email, but I had sent it from somewhere else, and I don't think so.
Because when did you send that? Because your aunt and uncle had asked about that. Because one of them was called to jury duty.
Yeah, maybe I'll look it up and just post it like in a text, like what year it was. I'll look it up.
So here's why I'm saying that, and it's because I recall the CO bringing that up. It was Jehovah's direction. Bringing that up in a meeting, talking about how it's not wrong for a Jehovah's Witness, to go to jury duty. And I was like, I kind of beg to differ. If your conscience allows, that's fine. It's up to you. It's sort of like I told the elder one time, I said, murder's a conscience matter. And he looked at me funny. I'm like, well, it is. Who's you've got one Lord, it's Jesus Christ, so everything's up to your conscience. But you're going to have to bear witness to that, to Jesus. So anyway, I'm not making any rules, obviously. I'm just saying that I beg to differ. I can think of several different scriptures that would talk about not judging a man. If you want to talk about it in such a sense, Jesus talked about how it's not right for a man to judge another man. We get all over the place. Who are you to judge a house servant of another? And so why would that not apply to a legal sense as well? And so I was bringing out to that CO that exact situation that Tiffany had just gone through. But what was interesting is why he said that is because he was called to jury duty. And he decided to go to jury duty. So I thought it'd be interesting if we would read the jury duty letter that Tiffany wrote. Because basically when you get a jury summons, it just tells you to appear and when to appear and how long and how much you get paid and whatever else. And if you don't want to go, or have a reason why you can't go, or whatever it is, that you have to, at least in here, you have to appear with a written statement of why it is that you can't serve on the jury duty. And I'm sure there's many different reasons why.
And I don't know if it says on the letter that you recently got, but it only gives you like a 7-day or
Yes.
a 5-day period to address it. You have to get right on the letter, get right on,
It did say
addressing it. Yeah.
So it was within the week. And so I thought it would be interesting because she did hers before disfellowshipped, and I did mine. Well, I was called after we were disfellowshipped. So
was just
there's a
recently.
very interesting change in there, even though we feel the same way personally, even though the circuit overseer said a Christian it's their civic duty to do jury duty. I beg to differ. So
There's lots of things, though, if I can just say, there's lots of things, though, with like a duty when you want to talk about government things. Like, why aren't you turning in pedophiles? Why aren't you, you're going to, yeah.
talk about straining out the gnat and gulping down the camel.
Okay, ready?
Or the pedophile. Yeah, and do we have those scriptures handy? You want to pull up a Bible so that way we can do that
You
at the
can
same
just
time?
grab one if you want off the shelf. That might be faster.
That won't be.
Or you can grab my Bible right there. I'm really fast at finding them.
Okay. I would rather do it.
Am I just reading them as I go through? Or
Yeah.
what?
And they should be all the same. I don't think I changed any scriptures when I did this, but you'll want to stick around and to see how mine changes.
So he pretty much used mine as a template.
Yep.
For his.
And we went through it together and assembled these scriptures, and so it's not like I was, what do you call that, when you steal somebody else's writing?
Like, not forgery.
No,
That's
it's,
signing.
why can't I think of it?
Copyright?
Yeah,
Copycat?
Why can't I think of it? Anyway, you know what it is. It's on the tip of my tongue, but it ain't coming out. Maybe this will bring it out.
All right, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I, Tiffany, and I say my full name, request to be excused from jury duty. While appearing for the summons itself is certainly not in violation of my Christian conscience, I believe my presence filling one of the limited juror selection seats would ultimately not be the best use of the court's resources in the jury selection process. And that seat could be better filled by a potential juror more favorable to the court's purposes, as the time spent interviewing me would simply restate my following experiences and convictions. Please look up the biblical scriptures cited as needed for the basis of my conscientious stand. I've been a Jehovah's Witness for about 15 years, and while not all Jehovah's Witnesses see the subject of jury duty as I do, my experience have illuminated certain scriptures to solidly form my Christian conscience on the matter. Galatians 6:5. For each one will carry his own load. As a victim of child abuse, where a conviction was handed down, and without going into detail, which I could, I have seen that the justice system many times does not work, which simply reaffirms what I have come to know in the scriptures. These are just a few of the scriptures that form the basis of my personal Bible-based conscience on the subject. Man is incompetent to judge another man. God is the only righteous judge, and only God knows what the heart is. And I put 1 Samuel 16:7. But Jehovah said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance and at the height of his stature, for I have rejected him. For not the way man sees is the way God sees, because mere man sees what appears to the eyes, but as for Jehovah, he sees what the heart is. Many court cases end in harsh judgments simply because of poor mitigation by a lawyer, or a defendant not being able to adequately express themselves, or simply because laws change. Many wrong convictions occur on the basis of witnesses manipulated by lawyers, suppression of evidence, manipulative witnesses, or simply because laws have been changed. The fact that the last president of this country granted clemency to 1,927, 212 of which were pardons, very simply illustrates that truth. Furthermore, James 4:11 and 12. Quit speaking against one another, brothers. He who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks against law and judges law. Now if you judge law, you are not a doer of law, but a judge. One there is that is lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But you, who are you to be judging your neighbor? So that scripture quite candidly states that God is the only one worthy to make laws. Yet in this nation, there are several laws, both on the federal and state level, which affect local courts, that conflicts with God's standards. Some examples are the use or abuse of harmful drugs, 2 Corinthians 7:1. Therefore, since we have these promises, beloved ones, let us cleanse ourselves of every defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in God's fear. The value of a fetus, Exodus 21:22. And in case men should struggle with each other and they really hurt a pregnant woman and her children do come out, but no fatal accident occurs, he is to have damages imposed upon him without fail, according to what the owner of the woman may lay upon him, and he must give it through the justices. The boundaries of sexual relationships, 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 10. What do you not know, that unrighteous persons will not inherit God's kingdom? Do not be misled, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men kept for unnatural purposes, nor men who lie with men, Nor thieves, nor greedy persons, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit God's kingdom. The value of human life. John 13:34 and 35. I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love among yourselves. Matthew 5:43 and 44. You heard that it was said, you must love your neighbor and hate your enemy. However, I say to you, continue to love your enemies and to pray for those persecuting you. And then chapter 26, verse 52. Then Jesus said to him, return your sword to its place, for all those who take the sword will perish by the sword. Okay. Just to name a few, but really the scriptural principles that may influence my decisions and adversely affect a court case are immeasurable. Besides my firm belief that it is not in my ability to reasonably decide another human's guilt, any one of such scriptures that might conflict God's law would require me to veto that law on the grounds of Acts 5:29. In answer, Peter and the other apostles said we must obey God as ruler rather than men. How horrible it would be for the victims, the defendant, and court resources to have to suffer the emotional and economical strain of a retrial that could be avoided simply by installing a juror who is comfortable with the duty. Do I follow through with these beliefs in action? Romans chapter 2, verses 21 through 23. Do you, however, the one teaching someone else, not teach yourself? You, the one preaching, do not steal. Do you steal? You, the one saying, do not commit adultery. Do you commit adultery? You, the one expressing abhorrence of the idols, do you rob temples? You, who would take pride in law, do you by your transgressing of the law dishonor God? While far from being perfect, yes, we have had many instances we could share in this regard as responsible citizens, but for expediency, perhaps a small local experience is best. I forgot all about this. My husband and I were victims of a minor vandalism. I called the police while my husband chased the vandal down in the street in his underwear. I can't believe I'm saying this on this. When he could not catch the vandal, we cooperated with police that night to track down the vandal, which required us intercepting the vandal's friends that were with him. I can't get it out of my head.
What, were you running down the street after a kid on his bicycle?
Did I actually give this to them? Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
Oh my goodness. We live in a small town, I guess.
It was funny when the cop rolls up. I mean, I'm in my underwear about
Oh God. It was like midnight.
2 blocks away because I'm running after some kid on a bicycle. And I'm like walking back to the house because he started going over the railroad tracks and the rocks are those big sharp ones. And I was in my bare feet. Oh, man. So he comes up and I'm in my underwear. He goes, Mr. Lombardi. I'm like, the bad guy's over there.
How embarrassing. All right, well, okay.
Continuing.
Who subsequently gave us the vandal's name. We gave that name to police. They followed up the next few days and the vandal confessed. So we cooperated in giving witness. We cooperated in the investigation. But anything beyond that is beyond my Christian conscience. If the vandal would not have confessed, anything beyond giving a witness of what we saw is beyond my ability. To illustrate, even after the vandal admitted guilt, we cooperated in the arbitration meeting. However, we refused to force restitution. We simply read the perpetrator a couple scriptures and stated that if the individual was truly repentant, he knew where we lived and could rectify the situation on his own accord. We are not his judge. I believe the vandal learned and respected us more with how we dealt with him than requiring a punishment of forced restitution. Now, what the law decided to require from him has little to do with us. I believe education is more important than punishment, and punishment is not always discipline. And if the individual does not understand the punishment so as to agree, often it serves as little better than abuse, at least in their perspective. As such, I spend 3 days a week in a volunteer community service knocking on people's doors in our adjacent 5 counties in an attempt to teach the Bible standards, which would keep people out of court in the first place, and more importantly, give God's approval. But imagine what would happen if when I knock on that door, the person who answers sees me as a jury member that wrongly convicted their family member, or conversely, if I were on a jury that wrongly excused the defendant of which their family member was the victim. Perhaps the court will see the large conflict of interest here and the damage to my voluntary work in the community we live in. As the scriptures dictate, I respect the role of the government and do my best to respect and abide by its laws. Romans 13, 1-7. Let every soul be in subjection to the superior authorities, for there is no authority except by God. The existing authorities stand placed in their relative positions by God. Therefore, he who opposes the authority has taken a stand against the arrangement of God. Those who have taken a stand against it will receive judgment to themselves. For those ruling are an object of fear, not to the good deed, but to the bad. Do you then want to have no fear of the authority? Keep doing good, and you will have praise from it. For it is God's minister to you for your good. But if you are doing what is bad, be in fear, for it is not without purpose that it bears the sword. For it is God's minister and avenger to express wrath upon the one practicing what is bad. There is therefore compelling reason for you people to be in subjection, not only on account of that wrath, but also on account of your conscience. For that is why you are also paying taxes, for they are God's public servants, constantly serving this very purpose. Render to all their dues, to him who calls for the tax, to him who calls for the tribute, to him who calls for fear, such fear, to him who calls for honor, such honor. Where it does not harmonize with God's principles, I must choose God's law, Acts 5:29, which I read already. Obey God as ruler rather than men. For those reasons, it is against my Christian conscience, and it is my belief that my presence will not serve the court's or community's best interests, so I hereby request to be excused. And then I put my name, sign my name.
And they granted that?
Yeah, they sent me back a letter that said I'd be excused from jury duty. And so then I proceeded with my life in doing, JW land things. It's funny that I read this now and it's been so many years. And while I still agree with most of it, some of it just, I can see when I wrote this, it was written through the eyes of a Jehovah's Witness. Some of the things that are said in here. Can I talk about the volunteer work? And I talk about some of my reasoning points. And while I can see from that perspective that it would be a conflict of interest, people still, there are people in our community that know we're no longer Jehovah's Witnesses.
Which is why it's imperative to read if we go into mine, we see the changes there.
Yeah. It's such a small community. There's only I don't think there's even 4,000 people in our county. And, we're just pretty well known. Not only were we witnesses and maybe some people think we're still witnesses, I don't know. But it's like I said in the letter, we served in the ministry in 5 counties. So we traveled a lot and a lot of people knew who we were. And now it's I have a little different perspective of that volunteer work.
Yeah, and again, we mentioned that I mentioned that in my letters to see the difference. So we pull that up, would you? So now we'll go through mine, we'll see those differences, and we won't read the scriptures again. I'm pretty sure they're all the same. I'll just quote them where they're at. No reason to read that twice. But continuing. I, Chad, and stating my name, request to be excused from jury duty. While appearing for the summons itself is certainly not in violation of my Christian conscience, I believe my presence filling one of the limited jury selection seats would ultimately not be in the best use of the court's resources in the jury selection process. And that seat could be better filled by a potential juror more favorable to the court's purposes. As the time spent interviewing me would simply restate my following experiences and convictions, please look up the biblical scriptures cited as needed for the basis of my conscientious stand. So, here's where it starts to get a little bit different. You'll notice it's very similar as it goes through. As a witness of Jehovah, in brackets, not to be confused with the Jehovah's Witness religion that misrepresented to me Isaiah 43:10, which says, "You are my witnesses," says Jehovah, who misrepresented to me Isaiah 43:10 as an opportunity to supplant my personal relationship with God through his son Jesus, with a dedication to a woefully imperfect religious organization that is headlong into perpetrating human rights abuses, including, but not limited to, forcing medical procedures and doctrine at threat of the loss of a person's entire social structure through shunning, including family members, and who are even now thwarting legal authorities that are attempting to acquire its massive hidden database on CSA, child sex abuse. My personal experiences have illuminated certain scriptures to solidly form my personal Christian conscience on this matter. Galatians 6:5. From a childhood of various abuses resulting from my mother having been married 5 times, no doubt lending to my own spats with the law, I have personally seen the justice system's limitations and some errors despite their best attempts, which simply reaffirms what I have come to understand from the scriptures. These are just a few of the scriptures that form the basis of my personal Bible-based conscience on the subject. Man is incompetent to judge another man. God is the only righteous judge, and only God knows what the heart is. 1 Samuel 16:7. Many court cases end in harsh judgments simply because of poor mitigation by a lawyer, or a defendant not being able to adequately express themselves, or simply because of the letter of the law that may not even be in harmony with the spirit of the law. Many wrong convictions or acquittals occur on the basis of witness manipulated by lawyers, suppression of evidence, procedural violation of evidence collection, manipulative witnesses, or simply because laws have been changed. The fact that the last 2 presidents of this country combined to grant clemency to 2,164, 355 of which were pardons, very simply illustrates that truth. Furthermore, James 4:11 and 12 quite candidly states that God is the only one worthy to make laws. Yet in this nation, there are several laws, both on the federal and state level, which affect local courts, that conflict with God's standards. Some examples are the abuse of harmful drugs, 2 Corinthians 7:1, the value of a fetus, Exodus 21:22, the boundaries of sexual relationships, 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 10, the value of human life, John 13:34 through 35, Matthew 5:43 through 44, and Matthew 26:52. Just to name a few. But really, the scriptural principles that may influence my decisions and adversely affect the court's case are immeasurable. Besides my firm belief that it is not in my ability to reasonably decide another man's guilt, any one of such scriptures that might conflict God's law would require me to veto that law on the grounds of Acts 5:29. How horrible it would be for the victims, the defendant, and court resources to have to suffer the emotional and economical strain of a retrial that could be avoided simply by installing a juror whose conscience is more comfortable with the duty. Compare Romans 14:1 through 5.
That's different than mine.
Did you want to read that?
I could. Romans 14:1 through 5. Welcome to the man having weaknesses in his faith, but not to make decisions in inward questionings. One man has faith to eat everything, but the man who is weak eats vegetables. Let the one eating not look down on the one not eating, and let the one not eating not judge the one eating. For God has welcomed that one. Who are you to judge the house servant of another? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will be made to stand, for Jehovah can make him stand. One man judges one day as above another. Another man judges one day as all others. Let each man be fully convinced in his own mind.
Of course, this is applying to the congregation. But many people in the world in general view themselves as Christian. So they apply those things as a general rule of thumb.
Especially in our community from a
biblical standpoint.
Yeah, we have a real high Christian, but I'm saying the person that's reading this, reviewing this,
yeah, most likely
would view things that way.
Yeah. Do I follow through with these beliefs in action? Romans 2:21 and 23. Well, far from being perfect, yes. We have had many instances we could share in this regard as responsible citizens. But for expediency, perhaps a small local experience is best. My wife and I were victims of a house arson and subsequent thefts. We did what we could to assist police in the matter, even offering a $20,000 reward in the house arson. We also cooperated with the police as requested in identifying and giving evidence of items that were stolen. And when we received any tips, even of occurrences that continued after our case, we handed those tips over to the police to follow up, never taking justice into our own hands. The police followed up with the evidence they had and were apparently able to get a confession for the thievery, but not the arson. So we cooperated in giving witness. We cooperated in the investigation. We also cooperated in estimating the value of our loss. But anything beyond that is beyond my Christian conscience. If the thief would not have confessed, anything beyond giving evidence is beyond my ability. To illustrate, even after the thief admitted guilt, we cooperated in giving our best estimate in the loss in value sustained by the thefts and the impact statement of how it has affected us personally, emotionally. We have yet to receive an apology or restitution. We are not even aware of the outcome of the case, nor do we need to know. We simply leave it with the legal authorities to deal with the situation on its own accord. We are not the judge. We have hope that the perpetrator will learn to respect his fellow man more than we are concerned with requiring a punishment of forced restitution. Now, what the law decided to require from him has little to do with us. I believe education is more important than punishment, and punishment is not always discipline. And if the individual does not understand the punishment so as to agree, often it serves as little better than abuse, at least in their perspective. As such, up until the recent pandemic, I have spent 3 days a week volunteering to knock on people's doors in our adjacent 5 counties. And since the pandemic, using social media in video and personal messages in an attempt to share the standards the Bible teaches, which would keep people out of court in the first place, and more importantly, gives God's approval. But imagine what would happen if when I knock on a door, or the person who views our videos sees me as a jury member that wrongly convicted their family member, or conversely, if I were on a jury that wrongly excused the defendant, of which their family member was the victim. Perhaps the court will see the large conflict of interest here and the damage to my voluntary work in the community we live in. As the scriptures dictate, I respect the role of the government and do my best to respect and abide by its laws. Romans 13, 1-7. Where it does not harmonize with God's principles, I must choose God's law. Acts 5:29. For those reasons, it is against my Christian conscience, and it is my belief that my presence will not serve the court's or community's best interest. So I hereby request to be excused. And I give my name again. So very similar, but very different as well.
A little bit different, yeah.
And, I had been called to jury duty once before I was even a witness. And
when you were a witness?
Before I was a witness.
Before you were a witness, okay.
And I went to the jury selection process, and they asked me questions, and I think the first question I said, I think it's crooked, and the prosecutors are out just to get a conviction. They could care less about whether or not somebody's guilty or innocent. Guess what? The prosecutor said, Mr. Lombardi, you can go. So, this is a little more diplomatic than that was, but it gives a witness in one way, at least for ourselves and where our stand is. We don't by any means look down on the legal process and what they do, but as for us personally, there's only so much that we, as Christians, you can try to get a confession out of somebody or talk to somebody, but really got to leave it in God's hands, as they say. Leave it in Jehovah's hands, as the congregation would say, while they continue to manipulate and abuse you. But that's different, a personal decision and what somebody's done to you. And applying a scripture is different than when the congregation tries to use it to abuse you. I'll just say that.
Yeah, and not everybody will have, obviously everybody has their own experiences and their own perspective of jury and the governments, and I think somebody who's had a bad experience in dealing with the judicial system would be jaded in dealing with the judicial system. And then when you have a conscience where you say things like what we said in the letters of God is the only judge that really can see the heart of anybody, it just puts a whole different perspective on it.
I just think it's so weird, though, that a circuit overseer wouldn't see these obvious scriptural contradictions, especially for him as being taking the lead. Here he is.
What kind of advice do you think he'd give somebody if he was presented with, like, what should I do about jury duty? Well, he'd probably give him a watchtower, but... Well,
I'm telling you the advice he gave, and that was a public meeting that he said that. Talking about jury duty. So... What I don't know that you don't remember that?
I don't remember it, no.
Yeah, but I remember...
I was probably playing Candy Crush.
Well, I don't know. I think you were probably concerned with your own jury duty situation.
Maybe.
But it was just kind of ironic that he was, pulled into jury duty around the same time, and that he chose to do it. And to me, the contradiction for somebody who's going to be trying to witness to someone else about the Bible... And then, if you're involved in any sort of public ministry whatsoever, can you imagine a pastor or a preacher being on jury duty and then the person's in their church? Mm-hmm. It's really a similar situation, because every witness of Jehovah, they say, is a minister. So here you are.
In technicality.
Yep. Yeah. And so here you are out there, going to be talking to someone, and then the person shows up to the Kingdom Hall as a circuit overseer, and they see you on stage and you were on their jury duty, or you were on the jury duty that released somebody who you feel that committed a crime against you or someone else you love. It's just the conflict of interest is huge, the potential for it.
I wonder about this too, because a circuit overseer would be traveling. What are the odds of that, for one? But maybe they just have a different sort of complex, because they're not really permanent anywhere. Like, they don't have they have their little apartments or whatever, but it's not like they really develop relationships with people in that community. Do you know what I mean?
No, but and that's what I'm talking about, is if you're in a bigger city, you're not developing the same relationships we do here anyway. But they have a 3-year residence. And for the CO here, it's in Fargo, right?
Fargo-Moorhead, yeah.
Yeah, so here he is. He's in Fargo. He's going to be called to court in Fargo. Odds are pretty slim. You're in a big city. You probably haven't developed that same relationship or rapport with people in your community as you would with a county that has, as you mentioned, 4,000 people in it. And the CO is probably not going to be staying in a county of 4,000 people. But still, the principle should apply, that the conflict of interest is just...
I see that.
And especially for somebody like your uncle. Was it your uncle or your aunt that got called to jury duty? I don't remember which one.
My uncle was.
And so I don't know what his decision...
I was.
Yep.
He went.
And he went to jury duty.
Yep.
Here he is. He's an elder in the congregation. Again, if he's
in a small community.
In a small community. So if he does that, and he's on jury duty, and the person shows up at the Kingdom Hall... How big of a stumbling block would that be? And again, not heck with JW land. How big of a stumbling block would it be for you personally, as being If you want to just quote the scripture, an ambassador for Christ. Envoy, if you want to use JW language. But the point is that the conflict of interest is still going to be stumbling to that individual, to any message that you may have. And guess what? They're going to tell everybody, one of their family members too, about you, and the ripple effects are going to go. Talk about a hampering to your ministry. So we thought that was interesting. Anything else you wanted to say in regard to that?
We don't have to extend this too far. I mean, this is just our, I don't want to say opinion, but I mean, this is an experience that we had that maybe we thought would be
our conscience on the matter. So you decide what you want to decide, but so many people in JW land let other people, especially the CO, and decide what they're going to do medically. They let them decide what they're going to do with the governments. They let them decide all sorts of things. No, develop your own Christian conscience. And you can see scriptures, and maybe somebody else has a different opinion, and they'll bring out scriptures to the adverse. If you want to consider those, consider those. And by all means, are we looking for people to follow us? You make your own decisions, but just know that these are the decisions we've made and why we made them. If you make a different decision, that's totally up to you.
Yep. And
in every case, you have one master to serve, and it ain't me.
Or me. Or Swiffer. She's here.
And we'll throw some random video on the end. I don't know what yet.
Hopefully not snow. I'm so sick of seeing white and gray.
We'll give you some more snow. That's what we're going to do, because that's all we got.
Well, you got some Pringles.
Enjoy your memorial. Or if you've already had it, I hope you enjoyed your memorial. If you missed it, again, not to be legalistic, but there is a precedent in the Bible of observing it 30 days later. Either way. So we fueled up over here. Over here, somebody decided to get their money's worth. Oops. This flag represents the United States of America. That's about right, ain't it? So, a beautiful day here in North Dakota. Our snow finally all melted off. And look at the grocery store. This is a small town grocery store. And that's packed. Because although you wouldn't know it, we're sitting close to 50 today, we are due for a blizzard, 12 inches to 24 inches, which will suck. Videoing through my dirty window here, but quite the sunrise over wavy clouds and dark skies. That's what a lot of snow looks like.
Lots of snow. Lots of it.
So, there's the update. We've gotten probably, I guess, it's hard to tell with drifts, but 12 inches maybe totally when you level it all out.